Good morning, everybody. How are we all this morning? I do hope you are well. My name is Ali Board, and I am broadcasting as part of my Technique Tuesday series live from my studio. Except, of course, you know the drill by now. You might not be watching me live. You might be watching via catch-up either on YouTube or on my website. No matter how you are accessing this demonstration this morning, thank you very much for taking the time and trouble to tune in, because December is a busy old time of year, isn't it? So I appreciate it greatly. And I can see that for those of you who are logging in live to the Facebook page, the comments and the conversation is coming in thick and fast. So let's see who is live in the room, shall we? Because I do like to give you a shout out because I really appreciate you tuning in. Award of the first comment live on the broadcast today goes to Martina. Good morning, lovely. Who else we got in the room? Hilary P, Kathy, Shani, Helen, Joe, Jeanette, Julie. Julie is saying, what's Julie saying? How quickly the weeks pass by. Yes, you're not wrong, Julie. I had to remind my husband this morning that it was Tuesday and I had a live broadcast to do. I think that was more for my own benefit than for his, if I'm honest. Ali D, good morning. Maureen, Rabina, Lynn, Anne. Dee is in the room. Who else have we got? Joy, Fran. Sup, Mr. Templeman. Jill. Oh, Tara is in the room as well. Good morning. Val, Cheryl, from Lincolnshire, and Ali WT, who is making herself a cup of Dorset tea. Good on you, Mrs. How marvellous. Thank you all very much for taking the time and trouble to tune in. Now, I have lots of things to share with you. Had a bit of an epiphany with my project. When I was travelling back from SAA HQ on the motorway, spend a lot of time on motorways at the moment, and before I left, I had my project up, and I was thinking, there's something not right with it, something not right with it. Couldn't work out what that was, but I've worked it out now. However, I have more news for you. Now, I know an awful lot of you know about this already, but I want to share it again, just in case there is somebody out there who might be not looking forward to the holiday season. So December the 25th can be a really stressful day for some people, and that might not just be because you find yourself on your own at home. It might be that you've got a house full of people, but the day is stressful. It might be that you don't particularly celebrate Christmas, and actually you could do with a little bit of companionship. So on December the 25th at 9 a.m. on the SAA's Facebook page, it's quite important that you remember that, I'm going to be doing a broadcast. Let's just show you a little graphic. We're calling it a creative Christmas, or a Christmas creative escape even, because at some point during that day, it might be that you just want to be a little bit creative. It might be that you want to take part in a little project just for yourself, all of those kind of things. So you need to be on Facebook, and you need to be on the SAA's page. We will record it and it will be put up elsewhere afterwards, but to be able to tune in live and to have a chat and to meet other people across the globe, we're going to be doing a broadcast. Now, this might not apply to you. It really might not apply to you. It might be that you're very busy on that day, or you're absolutely fine with the celebrations that go on, but you might be thinking to yourself, oh gosh, I know somebody that might really benefit from that. So if so, pass this information on to them. Now, you can go over to the Facebook page and you will already see in that event all the materials that you need to follow along on the demonstration, but I'm ahead of you today. Doesn't happen very often, but I am ahead of you today. And so what I've done is, in the description of this broadcast on Facebook as well, I have put all of the information of the materials that you need. I've put a link to the page, all of those types of things. So join me on December the 25th. It will be lovely to see you. I will probably rock up in some sort of Christmas jumper, because it's just, you know, that's me all over. But I would love to have your company on that morning if you fancy joining me. Right, on to the project. Actually, no, I need to say hello to some more people this morning. Joe is in the room. Barbara is saying festive greetings. Kat, good morning. Joe T, Linda, lots of people saying that they're going to be there on Christmas Day, which is awesome. Thank you very much. and lots of people saying that they're looking forward to it, which is all I want. I just want to be able to spread a little Christmas cheer. I think that's the thing. Right, let's take you to the overhead camera. And good morning, Karen. We can show you exactly where we've got to in this project, and I can share my epiphany with you. So here is where we got it to last week. We had the gold leaf all down. We were looking at drawing into that gold leaf. And then last week, as I'm sure you will remember, we were pushing some acrylic paint through a stencil. Now, if you've missed all of the stages up to now, morning, Kate, all you need to do is to pop back over to the blog. So that's www.learningtopaint.co.uk, and you find the Technique Tuesday drop down from the free resources menu. Then you'll be able to see all of the steps that we took to get it this far. Morning, Anne. So we got it to this point. We had the gold leaf, we had the drawing, we got the stencils, and now that's all dry because we've gotten a very sticky mess last week. I have a horrible feeling I'm going to get in a very sticky mess again today, but we'll worry about that in a second. Now, what was the epiphany that I had? The epiphany that I had was I was driving back from SAA HQ, and I was kind of thinking about all the things that we had talked about during my workshop that I did with them. And I was particularly thinking about lost and found. Now, lost and found is something that I talk about an awful lot. And what that effectively means is that can be interpreted in all sorts of ways. That can be light and dark, that can be hard and soft, that can be kind of washiness and texture. It's just those kind of counterbalancing maneuvers to get your painting to come to life. Now, this, like I said, had been up on the side of my studio. It sits in the studio like this, and I glance at it every now and again to try to decide what I'm going to do with it next. And my epiphany was driving in my car that I went, oh, I haven't got any darks. And that's the thing that is missing from this. Obviously, I've got a lovely pale, that lovely duck egg blue that we created last week in response to the colour of the ceiling at the Royal Opera House. And we've got this kind of lovely gold leaf, which I shoved onto this piece of mountboard is the only way to describe it. But I haven't got any darks. And I know that there's an argument out there for saying, well, why do you need any darks, Ali? Why can't you just paint the bauble in and jobs are good? And I want to give this a little bit of atmosphere, and I can only create atmosphere if I balance out my darks and my lights. So there might be a painting technique that you have heard of called chiaroscuro. Now, chiaroscuro was a technique that was used by people like Caravaggio to really make the highlights on his figures come forward. He would have them emerging from the dark. So that chiaroscuro, from darkness into light, that's what it means. And I've got all my lights here. I've just not got any darks. So there's basically only two things that I'm going to do to this today. I'm going to paint out the border in a very dark colour. We'll get to what colour it is, morning Tracy, in just a second. But I also want that dark side background to kind of encroach into my painting as well. And I know that there's an argument for saying, well, Ali, you could just put a dark mount all the way round. But you know me, never the easy route, never the straight route through, got to wiggle my way to get to the more complicated part. So that is what we're doing. What are we doing it in? We're going to be doing it in acrylic. So I have my tear off palette here. This is my, let's just show you the cover of that just in case you've not seen the other parts of the demonstration. This is my Frisk tear off palette. Just means that it's a little bit easier to tidy up, and I'm not throwing too much paint away or making a palette very dirty. Those are the kind of things. And I actually have a palette knife here to mix the colour that I want for this outside. And effectively, you know me by now, I went, oh, well, I'll just do it in black. That'll be fine. Here's some Mars black, nice and easy, jobs are good. And I went, nah, I'm not so sure that I want it kind of that flatter colour. I quite fancy it having a little more nuance than that. So I went, well, we've got this blue in here. So how about I put a little bit of Prussian blue in with that Mars black, just to kind of give it that kind of depth and maybe a slight cold quality around the edge. And then I went, well, you know, I mean, I like the idea of that, but I don't think that's rich enough. So, Quelle Surprise, I'm going to add a little dollop of velvet purple in there too. And what I need to do is mix up enough colour that will go all the way around the border. Now, got to have a Goldilocks consistency because I don't want it too thick. I don't want there to be lots of brush marks in it. I don't want it to be too thin that I have to give it a second coat. I want it to be just right. So I don't ask myself for a lot, do I? And I'm not mixing it with a brush because I tend to find with acrylic paint, morning Jan, I tend to find with acrylic paint that if you mix it with a brush, then it all gets kind of clogged up here between the bristles and the ferrule. And then I don't want to have to go through the whole rigmarole of cleaning it and all the rest of it. And I don't want to spoil my brush because I've got a nice little kind of flat here. This is almost what's known as a bright. So you get two shapes of flat brush. You get a flat and then you get a bright. And a bright tends to be a little bit shorter. And this is sort of somewhere between the two. These are the SAA's acrylic and oil brushes, which I do like, I have to say. We'll talk more about why I'm using that brush in just a second. I could have used the handle to mix it together, but I do need a decent quantity of it, so I don't want to be kind of rushing about doing that. So we'll take a little bit of the Mars Black. Oh, maybe we'll unscrew the lid. Maybe that will be easier. Okay, let's take a little bit of that Mars Black. Is that going to be enough? Yeah, it'll be enough, won't it? And we'll take a little bit of Prussian blue. Let's squeeze a little bit of that out. I do love Prussian blue. It is one of my favourite colours, it has to be said. And then we've got this velvet purple. Now these are the SAA's System 3 acrylic paints. They are my acrylic paint of choice for a project like this. I like the consistency of them, very, very workable. Now what I want to do is I want to mix those colours together, and the black is going to dominate the other two, but that's okay. I just want there to be this kind of slightly more nuanced colour than black on its own. And the difference as far as the camera is concerned might be very subtle, but I can certainly see it's there. It's not quite as flat as it would be as if I had just used black. Right, I'm going to add some more purple to it because not quite purpley enough. And now I can't get the lid on. Typical. Never work with paint lids on live broadcasting. There we go, that's a bit better. So I can see that Prussian blue coming through, but it's just being enriched a little bit, softened, if you like, by the addition of that velvet purple. Now that is a very subtle thing, and it might be that it is the camera's not kind of picking up the difference, but I can certainly see it. And using the palette knife as well means, I don't know whether you find it, but if you mix with a brush, do you find it sort of ends up like a massive patch of colour? At least with a palette knife you can kind of scrape it back together and then you're not wasting any paint. So let's get this, make sure that it's all nicely mixed up. I am going to add a little bit of water into that as well. Let's do it with a spray bottle just to thin out the colour a little bit. There you go. Can you see the colour now that I've made it a little bit paler? Just quite subtle a difference. Now we're after this Goldilocks principle, aren't we? Like I said, we don't want it too thin. We don't want it too thick. We want it kind of just right. I think the technical term for this consistency is gloopy. And I can't wait for the subtitles to see if they can pick up the word gloopy. So I'm mixing that together to make sure. Oh, the subtitles have picked it up. That's hilarious. What is Sally saying as I mix this together? Morning everyone, taping BBC One animal programme at the moment. They're promising red pandas and a secretary bird. Have they seen my upcoming classes? Sally, that's hilarious. Yes, I've got 2 workshops coming up. One on Thursday where we're doing a red panda, and one in the new year where we're doing a secretary bird. I mean, I'd like to say that I knew that was happening, but I would be lying. Dear. Right, so you've got that kind of nice rich dark going on. This is the universal mime for a rich dark. There we go. And I'm going to pop, how am I going to do this without throwing it everywhere? Let's remove the palette knife. And then let's slide my paper palette underneath my board there so you can just about see the colour. in the camera shot, and then we'll get painting. Now I promised, I've got to roll my sleeves up again. Now I promised you, didn't I, that I would explain why I'm using this brush today. And what I need to do is to just find the other brush that I had prepared. Here's my little folder of brushes that I keep for oil and acrylic painting. I've got, as you can see, I've got all sorts in there. I used to have all my oil painting ones on the left and all my acrylic painting ones on the right, and it was all terribly organised, and they've all kind of mushed together because it's near the end of the year and clearing up goes out the window. Now, you would think, wouldn't it, be sensible to use a nice wide flat brush. Because I've got quite a large area to fill, I could very quickly go around with my brush in this manner, bish bash bosh, all done. However, if you're trying to do something neat and tidy like this and you're trying to do it freehand, which is effectively what I'm going to do, I would be mighty concerned that I wouldn't be able to control how I paint this edge where the gold leaf is. And as you can probably see, the more I press on the bristles of the brush, the more they're going to go over the side, then I'm going to get myself into trouble, all of those kind of things. So that for me is a brush that is too big. So whilst it's going to take me longer with this one, what I am going to have is much more control. And this way I'll be able to do is, if we were talking in decorating terms, we would be talking about cutting in, wouldn't we? Cutting in. So I'm going to bring that brush down. And I think while your brush is dry and it hasn't got any colour on it, it's sometimes a good idea to have a bit of a dry run, to get hold of your brush and say to yourself, right, how much pressure do I need to apply? Do I need to release the pressure and just use the tips of the bristles? Or do I need to push quite hard to get the colour where I want it? All of these things are valid. I think it's a good idea to give yourself a bit of a dress rehearsal before you go to the main event. Now, the first thing I'm going to do, because I've got to use this drawing board later on today for some filming, is that I'm going to cover it with a piece of kitchen roll. That's far too sensible, isn't it? And then I'm going to have a piece of kitchen roll in this hand so that I can control the amount of water and colour that's on my brush. Now, I'm popping my brush into the water, but that is not so that it's not in watercolour style so that I can load it up with water ready to pick up my colour. That is just to get the bristles moving. And then we've already said, haven't we, that we think the consistency of this paint is correct for what we want to do. So I'm going to load it up, but not with too much. I'm not going to have this kind of brush that's wildly out of control. What I'm going to do is I'm going to paint in some to get the majority of the colour off the bristles. And then I'm going to do the cutting in. So very carefully, slowly and gently, bringing my brush down that line. Now, when I want to stop, I need to pull my brush, and I've got my head in shot, sorry about that. I need to pull my brush away because I want there to be a nice continuity between one section and the next. Then I can fill in the rest of it. So pulling out that paint over to the side and completing that bit. Now, I'm not sure whether that's deep enough, dark enough, but it's certainly good enough for the time being. Let's repeat those processes again. Now, this isn't going to be the most interesting thing for you to watch, but I'm hoping that you will be able to see more clearly why I've decided to do this and how I execute it. Now, if you were doing this yourself, you wouldn't have the pressure of a live broadcast, and you wouldn't have the challenge of trying to speak and paint a straight line at the same time. I mean, if you want to improve your brush skills any, then try talking to the dog or the cat or whatever happens to be in the room at the time you do it, because I can promise you it is quite the challenge. But okay, that's not too shabby. I'm quite happy with that. Can you see that there's a pale line between the two? Yes, I've erred on the side of caution. However, there is something that I'm going to do with that later on. So let's turn it 90 degrees. It's a little bit patchy. Maybe I'm going to have to do it again. What's Julie saying? Julie's saying, oh dear, reminds me of cutting in when painting walls and having to cut in around the skirting boards. Yeah, I mean, to be fair, Julie, when I'm decorating, that's pretty much the only skill I have. Cutting in, not a problem. trying to keep paint on a roller or even in the paint tray, it has to be said, my husband's not overly keen about letting me loose with those things. Now I've gone in a little bit too much there, so let's go back up. Steady old hand, Ali. And let's fill in the rest of it. So you can see now, I hope, why I've gone for this smaller, flat brush so that I've got more control over it. But the one thing that is happening, I am sure you will agree, is that this is starting to look brighter. Here are my kind of lights. I've still got something I want to do to that. I still want to employ a chiaroscuro effect. But this is the start of that process. So cutting in, going down, going back in, and making sure every last bit of that mount board is covered. Now it is drying a little bit patchy up at the top, but that's okay. The second coat is going to be so much easier to do than the first coat. Now there always comes a point with an acrylic brush where you start to kind of, the colour's all pushed to the base of the bristles and it's not working as well as you would like it to. So I'm going to very quickly dunk it into the water, take off that excess, and then look, it's nice and clean and sharp again, and I can go back to my puddle of paint. So you can just see it in shot. Now I'm gonna, dog hair alert. We should have an alert, shouldn't we, when I find a dog hair in my painting. Right, let's run very quickly down this side. We're also getting rid of all of those little bits of overspill of the glue that I didn't like. So let's run all the way down here. My brush is starting to run out of colour, so let's stop there. Backfill in the rest of it. And then let's fill in that part. So we're coming down, all the way down to the bottom. So we're nearly all the way around. Just bear with me while I get that in. And this is, if you are watching live via the Facebook page, this is your opportunity to get your questions in. So let's get that bit in. And it is looking better, isn't it? It's kind of looking like it has more purpose, I think. I think that's the thing. Just checking my hands before I stick my finger in the middle of it. Let's get that in. Pulling that all the way down to the bottom. My brush is running out of paint, I can feel it. And then going back in and making sure that the rest of it is all filled in. Load up that brush one more time, pulling that colour all the way down to the bottom. So, next we've joined up. That's good news. Now, this is a thing about acrylic paints. It's so tempting, and even though I know what I know, it's tempting for me too to literally turn it another 90 degrees and go round it all again. But if I do that right now, what I will do is, this isn't dry enough. I will just disturb what's going on underneath. So I need to give it a bit of a blast with the heat gun. So just bear with me a second. Let's put it on high. And make sure we work our way all the way around it, drying it all off. Coming back up the other side. And back over the top. Now I've got to be careful with the heat gun because I don't want to disturb the gold leaf. So I'm keeping it moving all the way around. There we go. And you can see that it has actually dried a little more patchy than I would like. So I'm going to have to give it another pass. I mean, I am being fantastically picky about it, but that's why we're here, isn't it? To be fantastically picky. So let's just give it another pass. So brush into the water. You can see that I've got a build up of paint there. I'm going to take the excess off onto my kitchen roll so my brush is nice and sharp again. then just a little bit of water, because it's very warm in the studio today, and my paint is drying out a little bit faster than I would like. Now, there would be an argument, wouldn't there, for saying, well, Ali, you don't have to do the cutting in again because you've already done it once, but you've got a second layer of paint going on, and so the second layer needs to go over everything. You can't just miss a bit of it out. What it will do is be faster this time, because I'm not trying to cover up a pale colour anymore. I'm putting a second glaze over the top. Now that is already 1,000 times better. So let's turn that 90 degrees. Oh, good. I'm glad that the tips about cleaning off your brush are helpful. I think sometimes we get so bogged down with all the kind of the technicalities of painting in terms of things, you know, like perspective and tone and colour mixing and all of those kind of things, that we forget the real basics of how to get the paint on your brush, how to clean it off, how to be in control of the equipment, all of that kind of stuff. So I'm really pleased that those tips are helping. It's only trial and error on my part. It wasn't some sort of magical thing that happened. It was literally just me testing and realising that if I didn't clean my brush off in between a few passes, it would get all clogged up. I wouldn't have as much control over it, and that's when mistakes happen, isn't it? So let's get this last couple of lines on. There's people in the chat saying watching paint dry is interesting. Bless you Tracy. I mean, Mr. Templeman, if he is still in the room, he is the fabulous director and film editor for the SAA, and that is how he describes his job. He says that's what he does for a living, is watch paint dry. It's hard to argue with that, isn't it? Right, look, I've got a brush. Look at the state of that. All clogged up with paint, no use at all. So back on the kitchen roll it goes to clean off the majority. I know that there will be people going, oh, that's such a waste of paint, Ali. What would you rather? Getting rid of the paint on here and having absolute control over what you do, or having a brush that's full of cloggy old paint and then you not being able to produce the nice sharp lines that we're getting? So this is the last side, isn't it? I mustn't get distracted. This is the last side, and what we're going to do then is we're going to dry it in full, and then we're going to do something rather dramatic, which I'm sure I'll get a lot of gasping emojis about. But it was the second part of the epiphany that I had somewhere around the M1 when I was travelling last week. So looking much better, looking kind of fresher, brighter, all of those kind of things. Now I need to dry it again. I'm going to dry this brush out, and I'm going to, just to make sure that I don't make a terrible mess, I'm going to fold that over. I'm going to go around with my finger just a little bit as well, because just here and there I've got the odd kind of brush mark that I don't really want to show. So just picking it off with my finger, really. And then let's give it a good old dry. And I want this, and I need this to be really super dry now. So let's keep the kitchen roll moving. Kitchen roll? No, not kitchen roll, Ali. Let's keep the heat gun moving. What are you diggling on about? Okay, that's looking better. Now, look at the difference in that to how it looked earlier. Much classier, much more dramatic, much more like that kind of darkness into light. What's Martina asking? I've not got any acrylic brushes, but would you recommend them for use with gouache more so than watercolour brushes? To be honest, Martina, I use my imitation sables for gouache just because they come to a nice fine point. Look, did you see how I magically made that appear? But I also do tend to have sort of a few really good quality brushes in terms of those for acrylic painting, but I also use, you probably saw them, hold on, I'll just fish them off the floor. in my little folder of acrylic painting brushes. I have an awful lot of decorators brushes as well, really cheap and nasty ones. I mean, that one is as old as the proverbial hills, and it shows. Look at the state of that. And I've got these varnish brushes, which are actually really cheap brushes, but I sort of tend to have a few really good ones for doing this kind of work. And then I've got a few decorating brushes, and then I've got some kids brushes as well for my acrylic. So I would say have a couple of really good quality acrylic brushes, and then hunt about your house for all the other things, okay? So we've got our dark on. A lot of you loving the dark. Can you see how it's not quite black? It's got that little bit of richness about it, yeah? It's kind of shiny through. You can sort of see the blue in it. You can definitely see the violet in it. Now, the epiphany that I had was that if I want this bauble to stand out, and to not be kind of arguing with what's going on in the background, then I need to introduce some dark to this as well. Now, this is where I need to be exceptionally brave, because I need to put some of this dark in the background over the top in a chiaroscuro kind of effect, in the hope that, because next week is when I'm going to be painting that bauble, I want it to kind of come forward, but I've got to knock the edges off some of this bit. So I do have to take a rather deep breath. So what I'm going to do is pop that to one side, bring my palette back into shot. Now, Ali has said the bottom border doesn't look parallel. No, it's not. It's sloping downhill ever so slightly. We won't worry about things like that. I could have neatened it up. It's actually to do with the square. It is square, but it's not quite square on the piece of mount board. I think what I would probably do if I mount this is to mount it so that my mount kind of comes up to there, and then it won't matter. It's just because it's slightly skew whiff on the page. Well spotted. Right, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to switch my brush, and I'm going to switch my brush to a filbert. Okay, what's the difference between a flat and a filbert? They look pretty identical, Ali. Let's just clean my flat brush off so that you can see the difference between the two, and also see how much water is required. So the flat brush is on the right, the filbert is on the left. You can see that the bristles are slightly longer. It is also sometimes called a cat's tongue brush because it's got that rounded edge. Now, why on earth would I switch from something that's flat to something that is also flat, but it's just got a rounded end? It's because I don't necessarily want this shape to show up with what I'm about to do. I could also use a round brush if I wanted to. I just happen to have chosen a filbert brush for this that I'm about to do. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a little bit of water into this puddle so that it is a thinner consistency. You can also see that colour emerging, which I know is exciting an awful lot of you earlier. Now, this is where I have to be brave, like I say, because I need to add this colour back over my gold leaf. So deep breaths, everybody. What's the worst that can happen? Let's get it going back in over the top. We will get some texture emerging, but what I want it to do is to knock back some of this blue. Now, that is a bit too thin. It's not sticking enough. So I'm going to add some colour back into it. That's better. To apply a little bit of dark over the top. Does that look scary? Yes, it does. I can see from the comments that some of you who are watching live on Facebook are having some issues with the sound and the picture. Facebook has changed a little bit in the last couple of months, and it does do, if it thinks your internet isn't stable, it does something called buffering. If you just pause it for a little bit and allow it time to catch up, it will come good again, I promise. So what I'm doing now is using a bit of water, a bit like a blending out technique for watercolours. You could also use your kitchen roll to lift off a little bit of that colour. it's actually transferring it elsewhere as well. But look at that. So can you see now where I've just knocked the shine off of that bit of gold leaf? What's happening now is that the gold that's in the centre is starting to come together, and it breaks up the formality of it as well. So let's do a little bit of that over here. There's a lot of you saying how brave I am. I think reckless is the word rather than brave, potentially. Let's get that colour on. We'll kind of whack it on, because you know me by now. The whack it on technique is usually my go-to. What I'm loving is how it's hitting and missing over the texture of those leaf stencils that we pushed it through last week. I am liking that a lot. I think that could do with being a little bit thicker up there in the top right hand corner. Let's bring that down a little bit more, and we'll get the kitchen roll back in just to kind of give it a slightly more stippled effect. Now that looks better. And I think this is something to take away from painting. Sometimes you have to take a very deep breath. You have to think to yourself, what is it that my painting needs? And do it for the good of the painting. It might scare you half to death after all the work that you've put in, but what's the worst that can happen? Now, can you see how my pale line has disappeared now? Because where I've kind of touched back over with that deeper colour, it's got rid of any gap that might have manifested itself. So much better. I am so much happier with this now. I was looking at it going, well, it's all right. It's okay, but it's not really quite as impactful as I would like it to be. Thinking back to where this all started with my trip to the Royal Opera House, that is a building that you walk in and you go, wow. And I wanted that kind of wowness. That's not a word, is it? With my painting too. So I'm just going to turn it 90 degrees to do this bottom corner. Get rid of those white lines in a jiffy. And we'll add some of that colour back. Now, there's something else I wanted to do down here. I want to take a slightly thicker bit of colour, and I want to paint really quite thickly in on the right hand side of this bauble all the way around. Now, I know that looks crazy. Crazy, crazy, crazy. However, that is going to be the start of my shadow that backs the bauble when I paint it next week. Let's use a little bit of water to blend that out. We can also go back in with my brush just to lift out a bit of that. I mean, I'm going to paint over the top of it, so it doesn't really matter. And just to lift a bit of that dark away from that bauble section. And then let's go back in with our kitchen roll to tap a little bit of texture into that. Because it's on top of the gold leaf as well, it's not drying very quickly, which is a lovely way of kind of being able to poke it around a bit more. And it hasn't really stuck at the bottom. I think I put a bit too much water in, so let's add a slightly thicker paint down there. That's all good. That's all right. That's okay. I sort of, can you tell I've got a bit kind of gung-ho with it now? It's all fine. Let's just get that in. All right, I'm really, really pleased with that now. Obviously, the bauble is still quite scrappy, but look how the highlights are starting to come through now. And then what I do need to do is get the texture away from the edge, because I don't want that drying with a really forced brush mark. Do you know what? There comes a point where sticking your finger in it is the only way forward. This tapping technique, I use this with pastels and pen work and all sorts of other things. So shall we give that a dry, and we'll see where we've got with it, and then we'll see if it needs anything else doing to it ahead of next week. Let's get the heat gun on it. Let's get it all dried back so that we can kind of see the bauble for the trees. Giving it a nice dry now. Getting that colour on. Gosh, doesn't it look better? So much more dramatic. And then I can paint that bauble in next week, and we'll have a lovely bit of red impact in the foreground then. We're nearly there. It's nearly dry. That'll do. It needs to cure a little bit longer, but look at that now. So there's shine in places, there's dullness in places, but what it is doing is emerging. So we've got that lovely drama going on in our piece, and then we're going to have next week that pop of red coming out. So next week is going to be the last week that I spend on this project. But in just a few seconds, I will tell you a little bit more about that. What I'm doing just very gently is just bending. The mount board had got a bit of a curve in it, so I'm just persuading it back flat again. And it's also incredibly warm. So I'm just being really careful, but I'm much happier with that now. Much more pleased. I can't wait to paint that bauble section in now. And that will kind of just be, hopefully, the crowning glory. And these are all cold colours, so I'm hoping you can also see how, whilst the gold was very rich and a warm colour, that pale blue from the theatre ceiling that we appropriated is a nice cold colour, so that's pushing into the background, and the addition of the blue and the violet is kind of pushing those colours back, so it gives a really good opportunity for when we paint that bauble in red for it to kind of come forward. I can only do things through miming. The red bauble's going to do this, okay? Right, I hope you enjoyed seeing me push that on a little bit. So just for a recap, that technique that we have sort of appropriated again is called chiaroscuro. So that's from darkness into light. That's getting those things that are we want to be bright and to really focus our attention on. We've counterbalanced them, that lost and found technique, with some extra darks in the background. Now next week, so the 21st of December, is going to be the last Technique Tuesday of the year, but it is not my last broadcast of the year. That broadcast is going to come on the 25th. If you didn't hear the details about my 25th of December broadcast, they're all in the description on Facebook. They are all over on the blog, or if you'd like to read up a little bit more about it, then find the SAA. It's got a black logo with SAA written through it. Find their Facebook page and click on the events and you will see it there. It would be lovely to share the morning with you, just in case you are struggling a little bit. That's going to be a very special broadcast. It's not going to go under the banner of Technique Tuesday. So like I said, next week will be the last Technique Tuesday of the year. And then I'm going to take a little bit of a break. I have got so many exciting projects to deal with in 2022. Some very different ones for me as well. I have stuck my neck out with my planning for 2022, and I'm going to be embarking on all sorts of things that I very much hope that you will be along for the ride. So until I see you either online or in person, take lots and lots of care of yourselves. Continue to stay safe, continue to look out for each other, and we will catch up very soon. Bye bye everybody. Bye.